The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hello everyone. This is Dr. Richard Barwell, and we are going to be doing this webinar on chiropractic, breaking the barriers. For those of you that tuned in last time when we had a major computer collapse, I now have managed to get a brand new computer, so we should be able to run through this just fine. That's enough of those barriers from the electronic world. I'm very excited about this. I'm going to be flying through at a fairly good rate. Just remember that this is a recorded webinar, so you can dial in and watch it as many times as you want. It's free. You don't have to worry about any kind of fee to be able to watch it over and over and over again. This has so much great information about chiropractic today and chiropractic in the future and your choices that you can make based on this information. I want you to stop and think about where we're going with chiropractic and what kind of information is coming down the pike about the future of this profession. And so we have to take a look at this, and we have to be able to break through some of those constraints that are stopping this profession. And most of them have been created by nobody else but us. And so we need to stop and examine and find out where the challenges are before we can actually fix them. So let's start talking about that right now. Some of the barriers of belief within this wonderful profession that I dearly love. I am an old-time type chiropractor, but with information from my education, it was my responsibility to build on that when new information came down the line. One of the challenges we had was the concept that's gone out there, and in the last 25 to 30 years this was really evident. And part of the reason this became evident was because while we were being challenged within our own educational system about vertebral subluxation, we saw that as being chiropractic, period. Vertebral subluxation is chiropractic, was that belief system. And any challenge to vertebral subluxation was in fact then a challenge to chiropractic. We need to break through that barrier because the information that's now available has other grounds for us. Vertebral subluxation correction is the limitation of chiropractic. That's all our job is. That's the belief system that was put out there based on our philosophy, based on the lack of the science that we had, that we strictly became sort of mechanics of the spine. And correcting a vertebral subluxation was all that we really ever did in chiropractic. We never considered why that worked. Structure governs function. I learned this when I was at chiropractic college. It was like a mantra that we were all saying back and forth to one another at all our meetings, structure governs function. And that was because we were stuck into that concept that spinal postural misalignment, that vertebral subluxation, that mechanical thing was chiropractic, and therefore it was the structure that was causing the interference, and that's not true. That's a belief system that we need to let go of. And it really starts with function governs structure, and then there's the play that happens with the safety pin cycle. Proof of chiropractic is found in the results, and I'm probably as guilty as this as anybody. It's saying all we really need to know is that chiropractic gets the results. And we've seen this over the years. So we know chiropractic gets results. We've had endless ad nauseum papers presented about chiropractic helps bad knees, and chiropractic helps menstrual problems, and chiropractic helps headaches, and it just goes on. And you don't realize that when you're doing that, you're actually falling into the trap of treating signs and symptoms, which is really the practice of medicine. It's got to be more than proof of results. We have to understand why we get the results. Manual adjustments are chiropractic, and anything outside of that manual correction of vertebral subluxation, if that's the belief, is not chiropractic, then we have to exclude just a huge amount of incredible techniques that are available out there that are not based on manual adjustments. And we know that that's part of chiropractic, and most of that falls under what is the intent of the adjustment. And if the intent of the adjustment falls into that chiropractic realm, then we have something to say that those techniques really belong in chiropractic. X-rays show subluxations. X-rays show misalignments. X-rays show degeneration. X-rays show the history of a mechanical problem in the spine. They don't show the subluxation. because the subluxation is not limited to a vertebral subluxation. The subluxation happens at a higher level than that. There's no justification for care beyond pain relief. Oh boy, I tell you, this is a biggie. And the problem is we have become so wired into the fact that chiropractic and back pain were the answer for chiropractic in the profession. What happened with this is that when the back pain went away, so did the patients, and also the insurance companies that we got into bed with said if they don't have any signs and symptoms, then you have no justification for care. That changed the entire intent of the application of chiropractic. And that was a trap that we fell into, mainly because of monetary return. Public opinion should determine our scope. We have to thank a guy by the name of David Chapman Smith in Canada, a lawyer, who started this concept. And I just got word that the British Columbia Chiropractic Association did another study out there asking what people's opinion of chiropractic was. And lo and behold, what did they come up with? We dealt with back pain. And so now, in their great wisdom, the board in British Columbia, and it's not just in British Columbia, but this is a prime example of what happens with this, thanks to the World Federation, and that concept that the public opinion should determine our scope. They said, well, if that's the opinion, then that's what we need to push. So they've come out with license plates brackets that say pain changes everything, and then at the bottom it says chiropractic changes pain. Really? So that's all we are. We're going to compete with all the medical doctors and their drugs that can kill pain, and we're going to compete with the back specialist, and we're going to compete with the physical therapist and the massage therapist, and you name it, whoever else is in that pain relief business, when what we have to offer is so much further beyond this. And for people to allow the public opinion that we set up as a false opinion to begin with to determine the course of our profession, we need help. The philosophy of chiropractic is fixed. This is one that gets me. We have the division in our profession that is so totally dedicated to the philosophy of chiropractic, and I don't have a problem with philosophy of chiropractic, but to say that that's it, the written word that was done over 100 years ago is it, that's all there is to it, and never will change, is not correct. The philosophy will have to develop as more information and intelligence comes along and we start to understand what's really going on in this. So we need to look at that. That's a responsibility we have. Things like this. Here's some barriers of belief that have been caused by all of the things I've just talked about. We hear this above, down, and inside out, above, down, and inside out, ADIO, all over the place. But what's happened to sensory input with this? And really the truth of the matter is it's outside in, down up, above down, and then inside out. It's a full cycle on this thing, and when you exclude all the sensory input, you're really only dealing with results. We need to take a look at what the cause is, and we have been really remiss about doing this. Another one we talk about is the body is self-maintaining and self-healing. Yes, it is. However, then why do we get sick? Something happens somewhere along the line that there is a break in this self-maintaining and self-healing. We needed to take a look and find out why that happened. How did the vertebral subluxation get there in the first place? We say vertebral subluxation is caused by chemical, physical, and mental stressors. We can already say these things. We learned these by heart, but we never ever bothered to explain how the chemical, how the physical, and how the mental stressors created that vertebral misalignment. That was a missing area. So we needed to explain that. That was a responsibility that we had to the profession that we just glossed over because it was just too easy to give somebody an adjustment and get results. And so we said, that's all we need to know. It was a problem. Interesting about philosophy and changing in our principles. We like to call ourselves principled chiropractors, and we harp on this and that's how we're attached to our philosophy. But this man here, this guy by the name of B.J. Palmer said this: "He who seeks truth and factual progress for the development of mankind is a breaking plow. He denies ignorant and stagnant customs and traditions." That's very interesting. But the second part of what he said really packs a wallop. His task is to liberate man's mind and body from the limitations of old principles by introducing new principles with greater possibility. This is what BJ said. We have a responsibility to develop new principles with greater possibilities for this profession. We have been remiss at doing this. We have denied our responsibility in forwarding the profession by just staying fixed and standing on something that was 120 years old and doesn't really hold today. And all I can add to that is a saying that only a fool walks backwards into the future. Times continue to change. People change. Education systems change. And if you were driving a 1930 Model A Ford today, you're going to find that it's really a problem being out on the freeways driving when everybody's doing 90 miles an hour and you're doing 25 at a breakneck speed. Computers have changed. Everything changes, and you can't go backwards. You have to stay moving forwards to stay involved with what's going on if you're going to live with the future. You know, you take this as a choice. You can guide your life with a compass, or today you can use a GPS. Which do you think is more accurate at getting you to where you want to go? Compass is old stuff. It's old traditions. It's old technology. Today we have technology that can guide us and pinpoint us to exactly where we need to go so that we don't get lost. I'm telling you, we have to update our principles, update our direction, update our dialogue, change our belief systems that match with today's knowledge. That's our GPS. That's where we need to be going. So here's something that came a long time ago. This is 1927. Subluxation is the physical manifestation of the cause of disease. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. That's completely different to what's being presented with vertebral subluxation. I don't see vertebral in front of this. It says subluxation is the physical manifestation of the cause of disease. So somewhere along the line, we had the right direction, but we got off track. And it's time for us to get back on track. So let's talk about what this really means. We need to consider the chiropractic adjustment. To me, this is way more important than the vertebral subluxation. To me, understanding the chiropractic adjustment was key to the development of my change of mindset in chiropractic. Chiropractic adjustment is a chiropractic procedure. It's not a manipulation. An adjustment is a specific. It's the GPS of what we do. So chiropractic procedure whereby the consequence of an action serves to continually modify further action within the nervous system. That's the primary goal of chiropractic from day one. The adjustment was primarily directed to modify action within the nervous system. The only reason it works is because that's exactly what it does. And then we have to add with the intent of creating harmony within the body system. Basically, the adjustment operates as a feedback system into the neurophysiology of the body. It puts an input into the brain responds to it, and it changes a pattern, and the body changes how it responds to its environment. So let's just think about this for a minute. And I know that those of you that have been on and heard me before, you've seen this, but you need to recognize this is a communication device for you and your patients. Because all we've talked about in the past is the bones and joints, the x-rays. What do the x-rays show us? Just had an old patient from times when I was in practice years ago contacting me, sending me his x-rays because he'd been to a chiropractor who told him that he was in dire straits because of his x-rays and needed to have a whole bunch of care and needed to pay ahead of time. Well, wait a minute. Bones and joints are the passive system. They do nothing on their own. So they can't be the cause of the problem. We needed to recognize this. We need to move beyond this concept that we're bone doctors or joint doctors. That's not the cause of the problem. Then we have the active system, the muscles. They create action everywhere in the body. They move the bones and joints, but they do everything else as well in the body. But they don't act on their own either, so they can't be the cause. And this is a great way to talk to your patients when you bring them in and you want to move them back up to where they belong in the understanding of chiropractic being neurologically based. The control system, the brain, the nervous system, the brain and the nerves are the seat of all dysfunction. That's it. They're the control system. They control the active system that moves the passive system but creates all the action in the body. They're the seat of all the dysfunction. So if you get this into their head and you get this into your head, I want you to just sort of address the effects of the intent of care in your office. If the intent, and you can practice any way you want, but you need to be able to understand how this is going to limit you. If you want to practice within the passive system and focus on the bones and joints, that's all that you want to talk about, then the concept is strictly about joint mechanics. That's all you're working with. And we get results with that, mainly because we're doing more than what we think. And so the technique with that becomes a segmental technique. It means you're adjusting a specific area for a specific move. You're creating a change in joint mechanics. Then we have the active system, the muscles. Now we're looking at something bigger than just bones and joints. We're looking at postural, basically the responses of the muscles to balance and motion. So now you're going to start using structural techniques. I used a lot of both of those in my practice. That's what we were taught at the time because we never considered anything past that. But I want to talk about this. If your primary focus, if the intent of your care is to improve neurological function, then the focus has to be the central nervous system. The concept then is you're making changes in the neurology of that patient. And when you make changes in the neurology of the patient, you're going to get changes in the postural, you're going to get changes in the joint mechanics. That means then basically you're using a tonal technique because that's what tonal means. It's talking about the tension and the action within the nerves, the nervous system, and the muscles. And it means basically that the only reason that any of the techniques work is because they're all tonal to begin with. Even though you want to focus on passive or active with a segmental or a structural approach, guess what? The only reason you're getting results is because you changed neurological function, and that makes that technique was tonal. Dr. Steve Hoffman and I have had many hours of discussion in regards to this. I don't know if he's listening today. We'll find out, I hope, at the end of this. I want to move to this: verification, extrapolation, and application. These are three words that I would love to have you working on in your mind, in your practice, from here on out. Verification, extrapolation, and application. So let's talk about verification. Comparison of two or more items, or to use the supplementary test to ensure accuracy, correctness, and truth of the information. We need verification of everything that we do. We know that chiropractic works. Where's the verification? And if you start to break it down to say, well, the verification is all these research things that have been done regarding chiropractic and some signs or symptom, again, that's limiting to the practice of medicine, and that means that that particular verification only applies to that particular test. We need to have something bigger than that. If we're looking at chiropractic as neurological to begin with, then we need to find that verification. That's the area that we have been lacking in for so many years. No longer are we lacking in it. Now we have great information available to us. So, methods of verification. Education. We need to continue our education, and we need to upgrade the education based on verification. We need to say, okay, if you teach me something, where's the proof of this? How do we know this? One of these things is experience. I've been doing this for a lot of years. I've been doing this for 20 years. Here's what I've discovered. When I did X, I came up with this result. I did it again, I came up with this result. So that experience starts to have some level for verification. Then we need to have research. Then we need to have it put in proper terms and research that can be validated. That means it can be repeated and you get the same results. Other people can do it and get the same results. That's the key area to research. That establishes that there's verification to the approach. One of the facts that happen with research is this thing called measurements. It isn't good enough to base your results and base your measurements on how are you feeling today, Mrs. Smith? I'm feeling very good. See, if chiropractic works. That's not good enough anymore. It really was never good enough, but it's all we had. Today we have ways of accurate measurements to be able to determine what we did changed the central nervous system. These are areas of verification that we should be using in our office every day. We should be having research that's done to support this. The research level needs to have a chiropractic intent. I'm not interested in the medical research levels. I'm interested in an intent that verifies chiropractic and what we say and do in chiropractic. So many people today are automatically just sticking neurological in front of whatever they're doing and saying, well, see, it's neurological. We know that now. No, that's not good enough. You can't have a technique that you call a neurological technique without having proper studies and proper measurements done and show that it can be repeated time and time and time again. It has to be chiropractically based. When you publish case studies, we don't want to see a single case study. As Vice President of the CCP guidelines, we do not entertain single case studies. You need to have multiple case studies in order for it to have validity. So remember that if you want to do some studies, and you can do this in your own practice, but we need to see repetition. Double-blind studies really apply more to the field of drugs. In the study with the research doing within drugs, pharmacology, even with that, I mean, they're down to a level of 30% positive results to be able to call it an accurate. 30%, that means 70% failure. I mean, that's, the double-blind studies really don't count in a lot of ways, especially with what we do. The instrumentation you use needs to be valid instrumentation. It needs to be certified. Please, 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 if you're going to spend any money on instrumentation in your office or to do research, please make sure that it's certified and it's valid instrumentation. If it can be challenged, then all of the research goes out the window. Next, extrapolation. What does this mean? Extrapolation means this: the act of extending the possibility beyond the range of normal or usual values. That's really an important issue. We can't just take what we said with the verification. We need to stop and use our brain a little bit and say, wow, if 1 and 1 equal 2, 2 and 2 have to equal more than that. That's an extrapolation. That's what we need to look at. And we need to look at chiropractic from the standpoint of neurological. Once we understand that that's what we're doing, what does this do for us? How does this extend the possibilities? And by values, I mean we need to extend our belief or ideals of chiropractic. So all of a sudden it opens up the possibility if we're saying it's not just about correcting a mechanical misalignment of the spine, it's really about improving central nervous system function. But whoa, wait a minute, if I improve central nervous system function, what does that mean to the individual overall? That means it has a broad spectrum of responses within that body. That opens up our possibilities and application of chiropractic tremendously. So application, the act of putting to special use or purpose. Now we take this information and now we have to bring it back and put it into practice. And you know, you're on these webinars, you hear this stuff, you get all excited about it, you go back home, but you're so stuck in a rut with that old dialogue and your old systems in your office, you fall back in the trap of saying, oh, it's too hard to change, I have to change my dialogue, I can't do that. And you go back to the old way and nothing changes in your practice. Nothing. You don't get better results, you don't see more people, you don't open up the possibility of chiropractic, you just stay where you are because it takes time, effort, and it takes courage to change the application in your practice. I can tell you just from making this change in my life and my approach in chiropractic, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of work to continue with it. You need to have close and continuous attention to what you're doing. You need to pay attention. The first thing you should do is completely rearrange your office. Change pictures, posters, move you don't have to build a new office, you don't have to refurbish it, but change things around, move the seats around, paint it differently, because you need to create an era of change within your mind and within the practice. And it has to have relevance. It has to be relevant to the patient. For instance, we just went to a seminar this weekend. We learned some absolutely new scientific research that changes the whole approach of what we're doing in the office, and it has relevance to you, my patient, because I found out that we have more to offer than I ever thought to begin with. We've learned new things. Patients like their doctors to learn something new. They don't want them to have a doctor come in and say, well, I learned something back in 1958 and I'm going to do the same thing today. That's not going to impress the patient. They want to know that you're up to date. Then you have to implement. Then you have to make the changes. You have to have some courage to say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to stick with it till I learn how to do it right. And you've got to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. Just as an application from a neurological standpoint, it takes between 3,000 and 5,000 repetitions in the brain to learn a new neural pathway. So you're not going to do this once and expect it to work. You're going to have to work at changing it and changing it. Now, most of you, it's not going to take 3,000 because you really were already there in your heart. You understand that chiropractic is about the nervous system. You just haven't had the application in place for it. So where's our verification? Where do we stand in chiropractic? Do we have verification on chiropractic? Is there verification that chiropractic is something beyond vertebral subluxation? Is there verification that chiropractic deals directly with the central nervous system? And then can we take that and can we extrapolate? Can we take that and move it further on? Is there that possibility in the profession today? And then how do we apply this? Is there some sort of system that we can then truly bring this into our office and add this as new information for yourselves and for your patients, for your community, but more than that, to redirect this profession? That's an important group of questions that you need to really, really consider. So research has now established that the chiropractic adjustment directly alters brain function. It's over and it's done. It's beyond even being challenged. We know now that this is what's going on by the research that's been done over the last 20 years. Some of it not done by chiropractic, some of it done by the people in the research in neuroscience. A lot of the work has been done by psychologists doing work that we should have been doing. This is phenomenal stuff. So there's many papers that support from different sources so that we know that this approach is correct, it works, it's been verified. The question is whether you're using it or not. The effects of chiropractic adjustment, Dr. Heidi Havoc. If you do not know the work that this woman is doing, you need to get online. You need to find out what she's been doing and where she's going with this. You need to take a look at her research center. She's a DC. She's a PhD in neuroscience. She is amazing. Her continued research reveals that the chiropractic adjustments have an effect on. Now, she's published in some very important public journals, so this is beyond reproach on this. There was a change in lower limb muscle strength. There was altered motor control, altered reflex excitability, improved brain reaction time, changes in cortical processing, improved prefrontal activity, and improvement in muscle strength following the adjustment. These are just some of the things. Now, I want you to look at this. This is what the chiropractic adjustment does. This is measured pre and post, and by very accurate standards, this is the work she's done. There's a whole bunch more. But just look at this and tell me if you think that this has more value to you, more value to chiropractic, and more value to your patients than saying, I'm going to straighten your spine. Research and the effectiveness, here's some of the stuff. These are some of the papers that you can use to start with. There's more, but these are some of the basic papers. You can look them up. You can ask us for them. We will send these to you. Just ask Dee Dee. She'll send you the papers. You can read the papers yourself. But this is just the beginning. Then we have this. And these are some incredible work, basically, that she has done that is just amazing. And once again, we can send you this list so you can get online and find these and check them out yourself. You know, challenge what I'm saying here. Go and look them up. I dare you to look them up, because in looking them up and finding that this stuff is real, it'll give you a whole lot more confidence in who you are as a chiropractor walking in and taking care of patients. And all of a sudden, taking care of somebody's low back pain has so little meaning into changing that person's life versus taking care of improving their brain function. I mean, gee, I'd rather have improved brain function. Thank you very much. So here's and with other studies that are long, here's what it says. Chiropractic adjustment improves cortical function and balance, excuse me, autonomic nervous system function, risk evaluation, language skills, motivation, thinking, memory, brain output improved by 40% to muscle, digestion and quality of life studies have been done forever, we know that. It also reduces stress levels and the inflammation process, which is the foundation for all diseases. It reduces muscle tension, it reduces fatigue, and oh yeah, and it reduces pain. So in British Columbia, they decided that they're going to focus on the bottom thing and ignore everything else above that as to what we have to market as a chiropractic profession. This is sad. This is a very sad statement, and a statement about how insecure we truly are as a profession. Extrapolation. It's a twofold consideration. Number one, we have to understand something. Stress impairs brain function. That's important because this opens a whole new ballgame for us. Number one, stress impairs the brain function, and number two, chiropractic improves brain function. All of a sudden, all this world that's going on out there talking about stress, all the research that's going on about stress, you pick up the papers, you'll find stuff in papers and magazines today everywhere talking about the effects of stress. What do we have to offset that? We know that chiropractic improves brain function that is damaged because of stress. These two things you need to understand create a whole new opportunity for us in chiropractic and in your practice. The real problem is this, that the brain doesn't have the ability to regulate itself, and that patterns develop through repetition, both patterns that are negative and patterns that are positive. They develop through repetition. You don't have the opportunity to sit in somebody's brain every nanosecond of their life trying to offset all the negative things that have gone on in that person's life from the time that they were conceived to the time that you saw them. You don't have that ability. So they have already developed patterns trying to deal with the stressors in their life that have now gotten the brain out of balance. And so with chiropractic, we can help the brain to get back into better balance. We know this, but we can't do it one time. Patterns develop through repetition. We know this for a fact just based on our experience. Remember that experience I talked about? We know that people that stay under regular chiropractic care, even if it's only once a month, tend to be healthier than those that don't. We know that kids that are under regular chiropractic care don't miss school, don't get as sick as often as those that aren't. The reason is because that chiropractic care helps to keep that brain in balance so it can regulate itself at a higher level. It gives them greater survival skills. Stress and brain function. Research has clearly established that there's a link between stress and disease. We know this. Noise, financial relationships, world events, media coverage, overpopulation, politics, oh my Lord, politics, physical issues, nutritional patterns are all contributing to our neurological responses of fight-flight states. Body systems are remaining in the defensive state without recovery. And the sympathetic syndrome, something that Dr. Bob Hoffman has come up with to explain this, is worldwide and getting worse. Absolutely. Dr. Bob Hoffman is president of the Master Circle, and they have completely changed their entire program based on neurologically based chiropractic. They understand how this works, and that's what they coach on within their coaching system. It's phenomenal. They got it. And if you want a coaching system that helps with that, that's the way to go. How stress influences disease? Look at this, 2012, Carnegie Mellon. Stress wreaks havoc on the mind and body. Researchers have found that chronic stress is associated with the loss of regulation of the inflammatory response, which then promotes the development and progress of disease. 75% of adults report experiencing moderate to high levels of stress in the past month, and nearly half reported that stress has increased in the past year. 1 out of 75 people will experience a panic disorder. Stress is the top health concern in U.S. teens between the 9th and 12th grade. Psychologists say if they don't learn healthy ways to manage the stress now, it'll have serious long-term health implications. 80% of workers feel that stress on the job, and nearly half say that they need help in learning how to manage stress. 42% say their co-workers need such help. Yeah, it's always somebody else's problem, not theirs. Look at this. This is a field that we need to be working with. This is a field that we can help and we can change. Depression is among the leading cause of disability in worldwide people, World Health Organization. Problems at work are more strongly associated with health complaints than are any other life stressor, more so than even financial problems or family problems. 43% of all adults suffer adverse health effects from stress. 75 to 90% of all doctor visits are for stress-related ailments and complaints. Why aren't we seeing these people in our office? The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, declared stress as a hazard in the workplace. Stress costs the American industry more than $300 billion annually. Just think about this now. If we can reduce that $300 billion costing of the American industry, how much is that going to improve job applications and job workplace and production in America? It's not just America. It's in Canada. It's in Russia. It's a worldwide situation. Worldwide. Neuroregulation, neuroscience involves the study of both function and structure of the nervous system. And that's what we need to look at. We need to look at both the structure and the function. I just spoke at IAFNR. IAFNR presents some great information. It's a good organization to belong to if you really want to find out about neurology and what's going on with it. IAFNR covers a wide range from molecular biology, functional applications to anatomy. It's fantastic. And they have me as a chiropractor speaking to them about chiropractic. And them is worldwide. They're medical doctors, they're researchers, you name it. They're neurologists that are all speaking and involved in IAFNR. They're listening to what we're saying. My goal is to keep chiropractic front and center. My focus is on how stressors create inappropriate neural patterns and why the adjustment resets neurological functions. That's what I'm talking about with neurologically based chiropractic. That's where the research is being focused in my mind and what we're working with Dr. Havoc. Functions of the nervous system. We have sensory input to gather information and monitor changes occurring outside and inside the body. So we have input going on. That needs to be integrated within that central nervous system. That's the important part. It integrates all this information to process and interpret sensory input and decide then if action is needed and what action is appropriate. Then we have the motor output. That's to respond to the integrated stimuli and activate muscles, glands, and systems. That's the function of the nervous system. That's what it's supposed to be doing. So we can look at that through things like neuroregulation, looking at EEG work. What's going on in the cortex? Okay, we're looking to see if we have a balanced system, or whether the system is over-aroused or under-aroused, or whether it's in that middle tone shift, that unstable area where it's bipolar and sometimes it shifts from under-aroused to over-aroused. That's not stable. That's not a balanced nervous system, and there's a consequence to that. And the consequence can end up with an exhausted nervous system, where the nervous system now is so out of balance that the immune system no longer talks to it, and the immune system now operates on its own, and we end up with autoimmune system disorders. There was an incredible presentation on this at IAFNR in Las Vegas just last month. Incredible, and they're talking about exactly this. And this is where we play. This is a chart, we call it the biochart, that we use in our offices to help patients to understand that the goal with all their signs and symptoms that they have are actually just a sign and symptom that the nervous system is out of balance. And our job is to bring it back into balance. All of a sudden this shifts the concept of taking care of pain or signs and symptoms to staying, the reason that they come in to see you is the primary focus is to get their nervous system back into balance. Neurophysiological activity measurements are easy. We can do this very simply in an office. We know EEG, synaptic brain patterns. Those are the hardwired patterns. We can look at those with a 99% reproducibility. We also know what the normals are for the limbic system responses for things like heart rate, respiration, heart rate variability, galvanic response, extremity temperature, and muscle tone. We know what these normal reactions should be, and we know that they should respond to stressors, and they should be able to recover within these ranges. If they're not doing that, we have a problem, and we can measure this now in your office very easily. We can also do blood pressure, should be bilateral. We can do bilateral weight scales. Posture is also a good way of looking at what's going on. Posture tells you what their dysphonetic pattern is. So these are things we need to be using with every single patient. And there's ways you can do it on a basis of per adjustment. You can do it as a new patient, as an overall, but there's then individual things you can do to monitor as they're going through care. Homeostasis is a physiological response whereby an organism maintains a constant balance of the physical chemical factors in their internal environment. It's a static thing. We're looking at homeostasis saying this is the ideal range, and it's from an internal environment. The goal of homeostasis is to maintain a set point in body function down to the cellular level. We've talked about homeostasis in chiropractic for 50 years, if not more. We looked at it from this standpoint saying we're trying to create homeostasis. But we're trying to create homeostasis in a dynamic system. So there's something we need to look at that was going to be much more realistic, and that was the allostasis. The goal of allostasis is to maintain an optimum point in a changing environment. So while we're looking at homeostasis, we have to be able to adapt to our environment within that range. It's more dynamic and an adaptive process than is homeostasis. It allows for functional efficiency during variable states. Hot weather, cold weather. One type of food versus another type of food. Whatever it may be, whatever those stressors may be, and emotional challenges and recovery from emotions. Allostatic responses, increased arousal in response to a stressor via the HPA axis, hypothalamic pituitary medulla, SNS axis, sympathetic adrenal medulla, and the vagus nerve, PNS. These are all involved in allostatic responses. And when you start talking about stress, you're going to talk about these axes because these responses are governed. Recovery from a stressor is just as important as its response to it. Oop, there we go. Allostatic load affects brain processing resources. How much of those stressors are going on at any one time in a person's life can determine the allostatic load, the amount of change being put on that balance system. Allostatic load refers to accumulation cost to the body of allostatic responses. Brain ability to appraise the situation is impaired. Excessive high energy consumption. Allostatic responses effectiveness decrease as the load increases. It triggers physiological and psychological disorders. That's why it's really important we understand about processing resources in the allostatic load, because this is why everybody comes to see you. Every single person that crosses your threshold comes in because something has happened to that allostatic load, and the processing resources have now become overloaded. This is where the integration takes place, and it's not working the way it's supposed to. The brain's appraisal of the stressor plays a major role in the body's response. As the allostatic load continues, as the stressors continue, the brain processing resources become overloaded and literally start to short circuit. Allocation of brain's processing resources becomes a disruption in the integration process. Information starts going to the wrong areas. The area responds. Now it's an inappropriate response. Now we have more problems going on. Every task is based on sensory input before action. Processing resources of sensory input is critical for speed and accuracy of the response. Neurological efficiency challenges can be caused by resource pool limited reach. I can't take anymore. My brain is frying. Cognitive demand and ability is now effective. You're not making good decisions because the prefrontal cortex is fried, and you get involved now with what's important for me to react to because I'm so overloaded I can't even determine what is important anymore. There's lack of recovery within the systems. The system now starts to break down, and we get inappropriate system response to start to create hardwired patterns, and now we wonder why our health is failing. Function of the nervous system, remember this? Well, okay, look at this now. What happens if that sensory input becomes overloaded? Remember, all this motor output is going back up into there. Now we're getting some problems in the integration. It's got so much information coming in, it can't focus it anymore. The motor output is incorrect. Now we get bad sensory input, and here's the safety pin cycle at the neurological level. This is why the safety pin cycle holds true today. This is what it feels like to the brain when it's got processing resource overload and the allostatic load is not working right. It can't sort out the messages. Everything feels like it's fuzzy. Self-regulation failure. The prefrontal cortex is the highest order of cognitive abilities, and it's extremely sensitive to even mild acute stresses. I don't know if you've had this. I hope you have. Somebody comes in, they're not making much sense. They're people that are annoying, and you start with chiropractic care, and they change their personality. They start making better decisions. They start to become friendlier. It's because the chiropractic adjustment starts to improve prefrontal cortex function. They start making better decisions. Chronic stress alters the structure of the prefrontal cortex pyramidal neurons. Self-regulation is dependent on that, on the prefrontal cortex control to establish cortical patterns. Self-regulation failure occurs when the processing resources of the brain become overwhelmed, and even minor lapses in self-control can snowball into self-regulatory collapse. This is the foundation for all illness. This is the area that the adjustment changes. This is why what we're doing in chiropractic is so much more important than talking about pain relief. We need to understand who we are and what we bring to the table. The term subluxation has a historical context, I understand, in chiropractic, but it's not ideally used in this application. The majority of the profession adherence to vertebral subluxation as cause limits development of the neurological foundation. When we talk about this, we need to get rid of vertebral in front of subluxation to elevate what we do to neurological. The subluxation is a neurological problem. Even B.J. Palmer was challenged when he began talking about the mental impulse and not the vertebral subluxation. All dysfunction begins with the failure of neurological self-regulation. We can render individuals suffering from chronic stress highly vulnerable to infection. The hippocampus, where memories are processed and stored, can become overwhelmed by cortisol and actually cause atrophy. Long-term constant cortisol exposure is associated with chronic stress, produces further symptoms including impaired cognition, decreased thyroid function, accumulation of abdominal fat, which has its own health challenges. Prolonged stressful circumstances precipitate lower levels of general health. This is stuff that's out of the neuroscience today. This is what we need to be talking about in our office. We're functional neurologists. We are not backcrackers and joint mechanic doctors. A single acute stressor affects the processing capabilities of the cerebellum, which include coordination of fine-tuned movements for balance and proprioception. This is why we end up with spinal distortions under stress. Muscle flight engagement. Meditation puts the cerebellum at peace, which engages the parasympathetic responses. Rapid eye movement sleep. Theta subconscious relaxation turns off the cerebellum guard duty. The cerebellum is like the silent majority of the brain. It's where most of the neurons in the brain are, and we have a direct effect on that area as well. Foundations for the development of abnormal patterns of neurological functions, the integrative challenge of processing resources disruption. This is a reasonable and coherent and simple explanation, and indeed a prediction of patterns of interference. Differences in performance can be reduced or even eliminated with appropriate training. And this is where our application comes into play. We need to be thinking about neurologically based chiropractic. I am the father of neurologically based chiropractic. This is the concept that I started in 1989 to try to shift the consciousness of chiropractic away from structure, back to neurological function. This is the application we need to get moving within the profession. Integration challenges, keyword is appropriate. We need to be able to measure pre and post care. We need to know that the appropriate neurological approach for that person is ideal and the effectiveness of our care. And the only way we can do that is if we have something that measures the neurological function first and then measures the neurological function at the end of the care, or even some during the care. Those are the important issues. There are 6 critical measurements issues. The use of standardized measurements, that's important. We can't make up measurements. We have to use what is standard for the health profession. Use of approved instrumentation. It should have FDA, CE, international standards, and Health Canada certification if you want to be accurate. Compare, the ability to compare results to ideals. A dynamic method of measuring. We need to have static stuff just gives you a moment in time. It's like an x-ray. That's a picture of that history of that individual at that given date. What's going to happen tomorrow? We don't know. The x-ray is not going to tell us. What happens? You've got to take another x-ray tomorrow and keep radiating this person? Not a good idea. We need to have something much more dynamic than just some sort of static one moment in time. Pre and post care comparisons. There needs to be accuracy and reproducibility of the testing that you're doing. The NeuroInfiniti that we designed meets all these 6 requirements, and it's included in the certifications. So a review. Neuroregulation, CNS states, over, under, unstable, and exhausted. Homeostasis, allostasis, and allostatic load. We need to understand what these are and how they relate to chiropractic. We need to have ideal function under both stress and recovery. We need to know what that allostatic load is doing to the individual brain system. Integration, processing resources. We need to be able to take a look and see whether this brain is working correctly or not. And if not, what are we going to do to fix it? Disruptions of the prefrontal cortex, cortical patterns, limbic system responses. We need to look at all of those things and see if there's a failure to adapt. That's the neurological subluxation. The vertebral subluxation is just a manifestation of the neurological subluxation. Sympathetic syndrome, constant stress pushes the system into defense mode. Fight-flight states create internal stressors. Chiropractic adjustment acts as a neurological pattern interrupt, which allows the CNS to reset itself to more appropriate patterns. And it works across a wide range of CNS functions, which Dr. Havoc is continually doing research to show this incredible power of the adjustment to change central nervous system functions. Objective neurological measurements are critical. Accurate, acceptable, reproducible data is required for our application, our verification, and our extrapolation and our application. It has to start with this. Care plans must meet the patient's neurological needs. We need to look at frequency, duration, and intensity. Frequency, we know about this, recurrence of care times. Duration, how long are we going to be doing this? Those we've worked with forever. What we've never considered is what about our intensity of the care? Does it meet the needs of that patient? If the patient is over-aroused, then perhaps we need to be doing care plans that are not overstimulating the system that is already overstimulated. Or if it's not stimulated enough, it's under-aroused, then we need to be doing something different. This is very important because we've never considered this on an individual basis. It was just go in, find the bump, and pound it down. Now we need to be much, much more specific about how we are going to stimulate and change the neurological patterns in that patient's brain, because that's what we do. The patient's nervous system responds and moves towards balance. Less stimulation is required, and therefore frequency, duration, and intensity must be altered to match the patient's neurological needs. So neuroscience has presented the opportunity for the chiropractic profession to update the old theory of vertebral subluxation as cause. It's over. Current life stress styles provide constant access to stressors, and the result is a state of neurological over-arousal and chronic stress patterns. That's why we see the sympathetic syndrome in over 95% of the patients. The role stress plays in the foundation of disruptions in neuroregulation and self-regulation failure is well established. We are not reinventing something here. This has already been established. We're doing proper application. We've got the verification, we've got the extrapolation, and we're doing now the proper application. It's up to you to bring it to your practice. Stressors induce the fight-flight response. Circadian rhythms, sleep rhythms become irregular, which adds stress to the system. It's one of the most important aspects of this. You ever notice you start talking to your patients after care and they say, I'm sleeping better? Huh. How about that? You've changed brain function to the point where their circadian rhythms have improved. Liver, pancreas, adrenal glands, thyroid, and immune system functions are all disrupted by stress. The amygdala, hippocampus, prefrontal cortex, hypothalamus, and cortex undergo structural changes in a chronic stress pattern. The consequence of the loss of neurological self-regulation is the foundation for disease development. Chiropractic adjustments alter neurological patterns, including sensory, integration, and motor actions of the brain. You know, if you are not having goosebumps, if you're not going, oh my gosh, if you're not having those aha moments with this information, then you need to get an adjustment because your brain is not working correctly. That's how important this is. There is nothing out there that I have found anywhere in the information on the internet that's for chiropractic that's more important than this webinar. This has the possibility to change everything that we do and bring us back to the level of respect that this profession deserves. The challenge, chiropractic care needs to meet the neurological needs of the patient. That's your responsibility to find out what that is. It's available. Objective neurological function assessment is necessary for acute patient care plans. It's available. The NeuroInfiniti is the only certified instrument on the market designed for chiropractic offices to dramatically assess 2 levels of brain function. It's there. This is something that Heidi put out that I asked if I could use, and she said certainly. The great subluxation debate, a centrist perspective. We have the hypercritical evidential analysis, I can't even speak anymore. Underclaim demand scientific proof and offer their version of the truth based on selective interpretation of some available evidence. Just some. And they can say, well, this is my technique and I can show you this is it. All the rest of them are not true. All the techniques work. If they don't understand why all the techniques work, then you don't understand what chiropractic is all about. To be that narrow on your interpretation is not good. That's an outlier on that downside, that underclaiming. Then we have the uncritical observationalist that overclaim. You know, vertebral subluxation is a sacred cow, and it gives it quasi-religious attributes that they play the priestly role of demonizing vertebral subluxation as a scourge of health that must be exercised at every available opportunity through the adjustment. And they don't care how it works, they don't care what's going on, they just want to stay within that vertebral subluxation philosophy, and by doing that they limit themselves and they limit the profession. We need to have centralists. We need to have people that are willing to take information and apply it, to take the verification out of it, to be able to extrapolate with that verification, and then to be able to apply it to move this thing forward. You have a choice. You have a choice of where you want to play. And your choice is this. You can remain where you are doing what you do, status quo. If you're happy with your practice, you're going to stay there. Just remember that without growth, you're dying. It's all about staying in one spot and not changing anything. Everything else is going to change around you. You can be an outlier or a centralist. It's your turn, your choice of whether you want to try to develop something that's better for you and better for your patients and better for the profession. Or you can establish verification and then extrapolate and develop the applications which will further the practice and the profession. And that's been my goal. With this particular webinar, I want you to see the possibilities of doing exactly this. Taking the verification, finding out what's been going on out there, extrapolate it, showing the potential of that information, and then start applying it within your practice and your life and within the idea of changing the profession. I don't know if there's anybody that's on. I don't know if Dr. Hoffman, Steve Hoffman is on. Didi, maybe you can jump in and help us out with this.
He is not.
Ah, that's too bad. Dr. Steve, listen, we've done several. We've done mechanical, we've done torque release, we've done MC squared, Dr. Steve Hoffman's technique, we've done Corin-specific technique. Oh, gee, I don't know who I'm missing. I know I'm missing somebody else. But we've tested, these are the technique masters that are willing to put this to a test and get verification that their technique does exactly what it says it does. And what they found out about this is the more specific that you can be, the better the results are. But we've seen the changes across the board by these particular techniques. And I know that Dr. Steve is going to be putting on a training program in December in Atlanta. If you're interested in his program, you need to get in touch quickly to see if you can get registered for that particular one. And we also have a training coming up for the NeuroInfiniti, which we are absolutely overbooked, sold out, so you cannot come to that training, unfortunately, but you can get in line for the next one. Dee Dee, anything that you would like to say?
Yeah, just if there are anybody that's listening that's, on the fence of implementing the NeuroInfiniti and you're in the United States, just remember there's this thing called tax code 179 that allows you to write 100% of the investment in any equipment up to $200,000 a year right off your income. So that's money you will not be taxed on. So just keep that in mind because it's getting to closer to the end of December.
Yeah, not a 30% write-off, 100% write-off. This is the time to act quick, so we can get this thing done now. If you're thinking about it at all, jump in and get it done. With this, we will close. Thank you.
Bye for now.